My name is Bruce Block, and I'm going to talk with you about The Apartment, released in 1960. It was United Artists production number 5901. It started principal photography on November 17th, 1959 in New York City, where they shot for 4 days. And then because of the weather, abandoned the city and came back to Hollywood. They wrapped on February 12th, 1960. It had a 64-day shooting schedule. There were two alternate titles that were discussed when the movie was being made. One was Who's Been Sleeping in My Bed? And the other alternative was Someone's Been Sleeping in My Bed. Obviously, The Apartment was the choice of Billy Wilder and I.L. Diamond, and it stayed. The opening few shots of the movie are New York City, and there's a lot of debate whether the script originally called for that. There are scripts floating around that say that it started on a close-up of Jack Lemmon's hands and then pulled back to reveal the big city set. And that's not true. The opening shots were in the script. And they were to convey a sense of a gigantic city with tiny little people running around in the city, kind of the view you would have if you looked down over New York City from a helicopter or from a low-flying airplane. They didn't quite get those shots, but what Wilder was trying to do here was pay homage to King Vidor's The Crowd, about the insignificance of the one little guy in the big city. Now, this is Alexander Trauner's gigantic forced perspective set, and there's a lot of talk that they used midgets in the distance in the background, and that's just not true either. Actually, they used children in suits in the background, and in the deep background they actually had kind of very simple marionettes that would move up and down on strings just to give some action in the background. Wilder not only loved this set, but he thought Trauner was just fantastic. It was their second movie together, and they would do a few more. You'll see when the set is photographed that usually, except for this angle, we're always off-axis because that far background would reveal itself as a miniature if the camera was put in the wrong place. This whole sequence was shot very quickly, just 3 takes per setup. Later in the movie, Wilder would get more takes depending on the dramatic action, but here it went very, very quickly.
It's all right for me to go home. You see, I have this little problem with my apartment.
Now, we go to this shot, the establishing shot of the apartment for the first time. And this shot was done in New York. It was one of the only shots that was actually shot in New York of the front of the apartment building. The weather was so bad and controlling it was so tough that they decided to come back to Los Angeles, rebuild it on the back lot, and do the rest of the photography there. But this is actually in New York. So we're inside now in the apartment, and we're introducing Mr. Kirkaby. This is David Lewis. David Lewis was basically a television character actor. He had some film experience, but mostly television. He had done Studio One and Playhouse 90, mostly TV. A very, very versatile guy. And later in his career, he was on General Hospital and did about 15 to 20 years playing one of the continuing characters on General Hospital. The woman there, of course, is Joan Shawnley, who's playing Sylvia, his gal on the side. There's actually an additional scene coming up right after the landlady scene where there was another sequence inside with Kirkaby and his mistress, and it was cut out. And when you watch the sequence here, you'll see how Jack Lemmon actually jumps camera position when they cut away to him.
From all that mishigas at Cape Canaveral. You're locked out of your apartment?
No, just waiting for a friend. Good night, Mrs. Lieberman.
Good night, Mr. Baxter.
Here he goes now. He's going to walk down here and turn and look up at the apartment. Now, that shot was supposed to take us back inside, and that was cut out. You can see he's in a different position now, and they're going to come out. He's going to hide, You can see where the light-colored trench coat works out so well. It just separates him from the background. It's also in good contrast to the trench coat that he's going to get later. Kirkaby's in a very expensive coat, and Baxter's going to get one just like it later in the movie. Also, look at the composition. You can see how it's composed for the wide screen. They're not just composing inside a smaller box. They're taking advantage of the whole screen. Now, Wilder was very concerned with the detail, and his scripts contained all the detail necessary to make the movie. And earlier in his career, he was very upset, as was Preston Sturges when they were working for Mitchell Leeson, that specific details in their scripts would be ignored. So I'm just going to read you the opening description of the apartment as it appeared in the script, and you see how many details are there. This is Mrs. Dreyfus, the doctor's wife, exposition, of course, getting all the characters identified at the beginning of the film. So here's what's written in the script. What used to be the upstairs parlor of a one-family house in the early 1900s has been chopped up into living room, bedroom, bathroom, and kitchen. The wallpaper is faded, the carpets are threadbare, and the upholstered furniture could stand shampooing. There are lots of books, a record player, stacks of records, a television set, and then it says in parentheses, 21 inches and 24 payments. Unframed prints from the Museum of Modern Art, that's Picasso, Braque, and Klee, tacked up on the walls. Only one lamp is lit for mood, and a cha-cha record is spinning around on the phonograph. On the coffee table in front of the couch are a couple of cocktail glasses, a pitcher with some martini dregs, an almost empty bottle of vodka, a soup bowl with a few melting ice cubes at the bottom, some potato chips, an ashtray filled with cigar stubs, and lipstick-stained cigarette butts, and a woman's handbag. That's all right there in the script. And again, the fact that Lemon is holding the tray here is important to the story. Here's Kirkaby in his expensive coat and hat, and here's Baxter standing there kind of like the cleanup maid, this schlubby guy who's going to clean up after someone else's fun.
You're on your way up, buddy boy, and you're also out of liquor.
Oh, I know. Mr. Eichelberger, Mortgage and Loan Department. Last night he had a little Halloween party.
Yeah, well, lay in some vodka and some vermouth and put my name on it.
Yes, Mr. Kirkaby. You still owe me for the last 2 bottles?
Yeah, I'll pay you on Friday. Oh, and whatever happened to those little cheese crackers you used to have around?
Cheese crackers.
Now we get some more exposition here. The stove. He's going to light the stove. This is very important because much later in the film we're going to hear about you didn't light the gas stove. So we get it out of the way right at the beginning, and we refer to it several times. And he's going to eat a TV dinner. So it's the first clue that Baxter doesn't cook for himself. Washes out the glasses and decides why not just have a drink. A lonely guy. And this is, of course, Adolf Deutsch's Lonely Guy music. It's a theme that's going to come back all the way through the beginning of the film. It disappears when he has a relationship with Miss Kubelik, and then it comes back when he gets abandoned. More exposition here. Obviously, these parties go on a lot. Now here comes Dr. Dreyfus.
Oh, good evening, Baxter.
Hi, Doc. Well, you have a late call?
Yeah, some clown.
This is Jack Kruschen, the character actor. These close-ups here on Kruschen were actually reshoots. They went back the day after the initial singles were shot and redid them for some reason. Not a dialogue change, but there must have been something in the delivery that was wrong.
I'll have a few people in for a drink.
As a matter of fact, you must be an Iron Man all around. From what I hear through the walls, you got something going for you every night.
I'm sorry if it gets noisy.
And sometimes there's a twilight doubleheader. A nebbish like you.
Yeah. Well, I'll see you, Doc.
You know, Baxter?
Baxter doesn't even mind being called a nebbish. In the original script, it actually said shrimp, and on the set, they changed it from shrimp to nebbish. Jack Kruschen was basically your perfect Hollywood character actor. He had done a few films, then really became a staple TV character actor and did hundreds of roles on all kinds of episodic television shows. Very versatile guy, both comedy and drama. Worked into the 90s, the late 90s, before he finally retired, and then he died in 2002. Now, Billy Wilder hated television, and he gets a great moment here to show us how much he hates it. Baxter sits down with his TV dinner and a Coca-Cola while other people were having champagne, digs out something from the folds of the couch, which gets referred to later when Miss Kubelik says, "I've found all this stuff in your couch, bobby pins and hairpins." So here's this pompous TV announcer announcing that they're going to show a movie that won Best Picture. And the Baxter character gets all excited, but of course, it's not going to happen.
But first, a word from our sponsor. If you smoke the modern way, don't be fooled by phony filter claims.
Turns the station now. All three channels are carrying a really idiotic cowboy movie. Wilder said that the only reason he has to watch television is if it's playing a movie by a director that he really hates. It's the perfect medium to show a movie like that. So we get to see just how horrible television can be. And then he switches back and he's ready for Grand Hotel again, and of course, it's just not going to happen.
John Barrymore, Joan Crawford, Wallace Beery, and Lionel Barrymore. But first, a word from our alternate sponsor. Friends,
disappointed, he turns the television off, and it folds up into this little white dot, which is essentially who Baxter is, a little white dot on a big black background. Now, he's already in bed here, and actually, there was another scene before this that occurred. Baxter went into the bathroom, brushed his teeth, took a sleeping pill. Now, the sleeping pill is important because it's actually the exposition for the sleeping pill bottle that Miss Kubelik is going to use much later in the film. Then what happened was Baxter climbed into bed and he pulled out a Playboy magazine. And he looked at the centerfold, then he flipped to an article, and there was an article called What the Well-Dressed Junior Executive Will Wear. And there's a picture of a guy in a bowler, and it says bowlers are back. And this, of course, is where he gets the idea to change clothes when he gets his promotion. Then he goes back and he looks at the centerfold again. Then he folds up the magazine, yawns, and he goes to bed. If you look at the beginning of the scene, you can see that the magazine he's tossing away is actually the Playboy magazine. But it was cut out. They were so worried that the Baxter character would be completely unsympathetic and that everyone would hate him and that reading a Playboy magazine was just going to objectify women even worse and make him really unlikable. So the scene was cut.
It's only 11, and I just want the place for 45 minutes.
Now, the blonde on the right, who's doing the Marilyn Monroe imitation here, this is Joyce Jameson, who had a brief Hollywood career playing kind of ditzy blondes and sexy foils for various comedians. But it's clearly a Marilyn Monroe imitation, of course. Now, Wilder had done 2 pictures with Marilyn Monroe, The 7-Year Itch and Some Like It Hot. And although he dearly loved Marilyn, and he said, with Marilyn's unprofessionalism, he said he would rather have Marilyn Monroe late than many other actors on time, he still found working with her unbearably difficult. So he kind of comes back here and gets some revenge by making her this dumb blonde in the movie briefly. Of course, the guy with her is Ray Walston. Walston started on Broadway back in 1945, and he won a Tony for Damn Yankees. Then he came out and started doing character parts here in Hollywood, probably most famous, most well-known for television, where he was the Martian on My Favorite Martian, and then later he was the judge on Picket Fences. He worked for Wilder again when Peter Sellers had a heart attack before they started shooting Kiss Me Stupid, and he filled in for Peter Sellers in that. So here he comes out of the apartment again. We're now on the back lot. This is not in New York City. And you just watch the composition how he slides down into the far lower left corner of the screen. Now, even here, watch the put down. She gets the wallet, give him $1.
Thanks, lady. Put it back.
Now put it back. See, he doesn't trust the women, and the women are portrayed as kind of these bimbo, floozy, gold digger types. Cartoony, almost, which is probably there to help lessen the idea that everyone is actually committing adultery.
She's out of a job.
So they're going to go up and they're going to go inside, and now Lemon the rejected, lonely guy. There's Adolf Deutsch's theme again. It's going to take off down the street. And the reason we don't pan any further is we're on the back lot.
Get the key, will you? Not there. Under the mat.
Under the mat?
Come on. Open up. We haven't got all night.
This is your mother's apartment?
That's right.
And they go in. This gives us a little joke here again with the doctor, another woman in the room, because he goes through the entire film really never knowing what's actually happened. He thinks that Baxter is a real gigolo Romeo. And now here we are in Central Park. There were two shots made. This is the tighter shot. It starts kind of just beyond full figure and then dollies in. And there was a much wider shot made, a hugely wide shot. And of course, there's no one in frame. It's that long single perspective shot, the lonely guy. It's really no different from the single perspective shot of Baxter in the office, that vanishing point that goes off to nowhere, and the one guy alone in this empty sea of an office or the empty sea of a bench. Here we are. This is a set, big set, everyone coming to work, and we're going to introduce Miss Kubelik here. Now, Baxter plays that he has a cold, and actually when they shot in New York in Central Park, it was weeks before this, but Jack Lemmon actually did get a cold. It was about 15 degrees outside when they shot in Central Park. They were doing a wet down, and all the water actually froze. It was too late at night, and Lemmon got a cold.
Why, Miss Kubelik? That's all. Take it away.
Watch the door, please.
We introduce the elevator starter, and it says in the script that Miss Kubelik is unique. She wears a carnation, and there's something about her personality that makes her unique. And of course, that's because you have Shirley MacLaine. But the things that she brings to it are also so special. First of all, we have a two-shot here, too. We're always going to see them, whenever he possibly can, together in a two-shot. And when she's with Sheldrake, they're often in singles. But here they are together. Look how the lighting's been pulled down in the back, too. The extras are much darker than the foreground. The cameraman, Joseph Lachelle, although he had a wide range of styles that he could bring to a movie, film noir was kind of his specialty. And we'll talk more about that as the movie gets darker.
Watch your step. And watch your hands, Mr. Kirkby.
And here's her little hand gestures.
Shut these doors on you, and 20 next.
Just a little flair that's so great that she brings to it. Now we're going to come back to our big set here. A bit of a conversation here. The employee coat rack. And as we come around, we'll see the giant set again. And because we're so off axis to it, they have to be very careful with the camera composition so they don't reveal the miniatures. You can't actually dolly the camera. The most you can do here is pan. And you can see how the vanishing point is hidden behind some columns because it would give away the miniaturization of the set itself. Now, there's a very long scene, the telephone scene, where we introduce each one of the four guys, their relationship with the calendar. And this was done in only 6 takes. There's 2 sizes and only 6 takes. And it goes on for pages.
Mrs. Baxter on the 19th floor.
Oh, buddy boy.
There's Ray Walston again.
Call you. I'm sorry about that mess on the living room wall. You see, my little friend, she kept insisting...
Now, this is going to introduce an important story point that doesn't come up until the end of the movie.
To my apartment. You're supposed to leave it under the mat.
Talking about the key under the mat. And he says, I did leave the key under the mat. And he said, it was the wrong key. And then he checks to see what key it is. And he says, yeah, how about that? Couldn't get into the executive washroom. So now we've set up a plot point that is not going to come back until the very end of the movie. This is how brilliantly written it is. At the end, Baxter is going to give Sheldrake the key. We find out it is the executive washroom key. So it's set up now. So when we get down to the end, it's not, what key, anything? It's all properly... Now here you can actually see down to the end, and you begin to see that there is a forcing in the perspective of that angle. So we're going to tighten up now. He's going to make another phone call here in a second. Now, again, to talk about how specific Wilder and Diamond are in their scripts, the messenger is going to bring the key over in an envelope. Here he comes. And the script says not only is there an envelope, but it's the kind of envelope with a string. It says he unwraps the string, he drops the key onto the desk, he checks it, takes the other key, puts it into the envelope, hides it. The boy is curious, wraps the string again, and leaves. All of that is in the script. Nothing is left for interpretation. So now we're going to introduce some of the other characters. This, of course, is Willard Waterman. Waterman was also a character actor, did a lot of movies, and then went into TV in 1955. He had kind of his trademark television show. He was the Great Gildersleeve. That's where he developed the talking and the affectation of going up on the last word in certain lines. Great character actor from the old golden days of Hollywood and TV, Willard Waterman.
Spend the night there. Sweat it out. That's the way you get pneumonia. And if I got pneumonia, I'd be in bed for a month.
Okay, you made your point. We'll just have to do it next Wednesday night. It's the only night of the week I can get away.
Wednesday.
So he's checking the calendar. Now, the calendar here actually becomes a bigger story point, but some of it was cut out of the movie. Later, they keep returning to close-ups of the calendar to show that the four middle managers are no longer on the calendar and that it's all Sheldrake, but those scenes were actually cut out. They weren't really scenes. They were just kind of close-ups of the calendar to use in a montage. Now, here's David White, the character actor. Of course, we all really know him as Larry Tate from Bewitched. But he was, at the time, a very busy television actor. He was on Playhouse 90 and all the high-end dramatic shows and could do comedy and drama. What's interesting is that even though Wilder hated TV, almost all his supporting cast were TV actors.
Premium-wise and billing-wise, we are 18% ahead of last year.
And then here's Kirkaby again. That's actually, of course, the same set in the background.
Yeah, Baxter, what's up?
Instead of Friday, could you possibly...
So here's Baxter, the perfect corporate soldier. Cooperative, unreflective, blinded by the need for career advancement and completely non-judgmental about his boss's behavior. He really is the schlemiel and the worm that people describe him as in the movie. And that's where he needs to start. Wilder said that the movie is about two people who become emancipated. And so we need to show what they become emancipated from. Lemon had been working with George Cukor years earlier on It Should Happen to You in 1954. And Lemon had a big speech in the movie. And between takes, Cukor would come up and say, I need you to do a little bit less, a little bit less. And they did take 9, 10, 11, 12. And each time, Cukor would come in and say, I need you to do less. Got to make it a little smaller, a little bit less. And finally, Lemon said to Cukor, Mr. Cukor, if I do any less, I won't be acting at all. And Cukor said, now you're getting the idea. And you can see how brilliantly Lemon underplays everything. It's big enough to get the laugh, but small enough to keep it real and truthful. And Wilder always said that it didn't matter if it was a farce or a drama, it had to be truthful. And he got it out of Lemon.
All right, I'll tell him. Hey, Baxter, that was personnel. Mr. Sheldrake's secretary. Sheldrake? She's been trying to reach you for the last 20 minutes. They want you...
Now we're going to go up to the 27th floor, and we're going to meet Sheldrake.
You getting promoted or getting fired? Would you care to make a small wager? Well, I've been here twice as long as you have, and they never... say $1.
So he's going to take off. You know, we avoid the end of that big room because it'll be a giveaway right there. Now he's going to move to the first elevator. And again, this is all in the script, of course. And then Miss Kubelik is going to open. He's going to rush over, hop in.
27, please. Head drive carefully. You're carrying precious cargo. I mean, manpower-wise.
Now we have that two-shot again, that friendly two-shot with the two of them. She's got her carnation on, of course, that she's going to give to him. See how excited he is. What he's doing is finally starting to pay off. He doesn't care about the morality of it. He just wants that promotion. He's just bursting from the seams here.
Really?
The characters you meet. Something happens to men in elevators. Must be the change of altitude. The blood rushes to their head or something. Boy, I could tell you stories.
We can see that there's a certain jaded emotion in Miss Kubelik. He's friendly, keeps her distance just a little bit. There's that hand motion again.
I hope everything goes all right.
I hope so. But you know they call me on a day like this.
Now here comes the carnation. Sweet.
Thank you. You know, that's the first thing I ever noticed about you. When you were still in the local elevator, you always wore a flower.
Good luck. And watch
Now
your
here's another long hallway, not like the downstairs hallway, but a big hallway and lots of glass. The office couldn't look more different from the apartment itself. The apartment is cozy. The office is ice cold. And here's Edie Adams, Miss Olson, the secretary. We're going to go on in now. We're going to meet Sheldrake. Sheldrake is an interesting last name. Wilder would use it twice more, in Sunset Boulevard and in Kiss Me Stupid. Now, originally, the role of Sheldrake was to be played by Paul Douglas, a really extraordinary character actor at the time. And he had a deal, a contract, and he died of a heart attack very suddenly. And so Wilder had to call Fred MacMurray. And MacMurray was very upset, and he said, "You only call me when you're in trouble, and I have a contract with Disney now. I can't play a married man who's having an affair in the apartment of one of my employees. I can't do it." And, of course, Wilder talked him into it anyway, and he absolutely made the role his own. You can see how they're two completely different people. Sheldrake is friendly but very controlling. He's a liar. He's stiff. He's basically humorless. And Lemon is loosey-goosey. As the movie goes on, he dances, he hums, he sings to himself, he prances around. He's a soft guy. And the Fred MacMurray character is a conservative stiff. He has mixed moral attitude. On one hand, he's sleeping with Miss Kubelik, and on the other side, he's embarrassed or surprised when his kid says propagation at Christmas.
So the day before the Kentucky Derby, I called in the Vice Squad, and we raided the 13th floor.
The Vice Squad?
That's right.
Well, what's that got to do with me? I'm not running any bookie joints.
Just what kind of a joint are you running?
Sir?
There's a certain key floating around this office, from Kirkby
moves into a close-up here. Now, the movie has an overall visual look, not only due to the art direction, but due to the camera work as well. Almost the entire movie was shot with a 40-millimeter lens. The only time they changed was for close-ups, and those were 75-millimeter lenses. But everything else, all the wide shots, including the office lobby and the office floor with the forced perspective, all shot with a 40-millimeter lens. Wilder felt that if the camera became pyrotechnic, it would pull you out of the story. And he said once that happened, you were dead. If the audience said, "Ooh, what a great shot," the movie was over for him. Wilder said that Jack Lemmon was my everyman. He could do everything except kissing and lovemaking scenes, but there was a little bit of genius in everything that he did. Wilder thought that Lemmon was the purest, most professional actor he ever worked with. He actually offered him the job when they were previewing Some Like It Hot. They had gone back east. They were at William Paley's house. They had a preview, and as they were coming back to the city, Wilder told Lemmon about the apartment and offered him the role. Lemmon is naturally the likable, attractive schlemiel. Wilder said, "You don't need to spend an hour establishing his character." He said casting Lemmon was critical because Baxter has so few redeeming qualities other than wanting a career advancement. We had to have someone who would bring some additional sympathy to the role. 4 or 5 months after the movie was released, Wilder was still worried that the audience didn't like Baxter, and Wilder suggested to Diamond that maybe they should have given the Baxter character a limp or a club foot or something so that the audience would like him more. And Diamond laughed and said, "The movie's in release, the movie's out, it's a hit, it's a success. I don't think we have to worry about that."
Yes, dear. I called you earlier. Where were you? Oh, you had to take Tommy to the dentist, huh? No cavities. Good. Hold it, dear. Where are you going, Baxter?
I don't want to intrude. I thought since everything's straightened out anyway.
I'm not through with you yet. The reason I called is I won't be home for dinner tonight. The branch manager from Kansas City's in town. I'm taking him to the theater. Music Man, what else? No, don't wait up for me, darling. Goodbye. Tell me, Baxter, have you seen Music Man?
Well, not yet. I hear it's one swell show.
How would you like to go tonight?
Sheldrake suggests that Baxter go see Music Man. Originally, it was going to be South Pacific, and when they got to New York, Wilder went and saw South Pacific and hated it. And he said, I'm not doing that. No one would want to see South Pacific. It's a horrible musical. So he changed it to The Music Man, which he liked very much. When they shot those scenes, they actually did shoot them at the Majestic Theater in New York City.
We'll give the tickets to somebody else.
Look, Baxter, I'm not just giving these tickets. I want to swap them.
Swap for what?
Here comes what Wilder called 2 + 2, that he learned from Ernst Lubitsch. He said, you let the audience add up 2 + 2. The only person who doesn't understand what's about to happen is Baxter. The audience understands that Sheldrake wants the apartment, 2 + 2 = 4, and the audience gets to add it up, and they say 4. And here's the confirmation. Wilder said, the audience loves you when you give them the math, but you let them do the mathematics. You let them do the addition. And now here, in great little bit, this took 16 takes, actually. Takes out what's supposed to be the pen, and it's the thermometer. Puts it back. To find an actor who can do this much physical business exactly and get these lines right and act is tough. Lemmon is a real genius.
Now remember, Baxter, this is going to be our little secret.
Oh, yes, of course.
You know how people talk.
You don't have to worry about that.
Not that I have anything to hide.
Well, certainly not. It's none of my business. 4 apples, 5 apples, what's the difference?
And again, he almost insults his boss. 4 bad apples, 5 bad apples. But he really doesn't understand the morality or the ramifications of what's going to happen. He takes his Kleenex, and the little guy leaves. So waiting here in the lobby for Miss Kubelik to get out, he gets put down again. Here come the girls.
figure a man in his position, he'll take me to El Morocco, maybe 21. Instead, he takes me to Hamburg Heaven and some schnook's apartment.
Some schnook's apartment. That's him. Gets nailed again. Now, here comes Miss Kubelik. He doesn't even recognize her for a moment. Now, she's actually wearing Audrey Wilder's coat. Audrey loaned her coat to the wardrobe department to be Miss Kubelik's. So they're on the set here. They're leaving. And when they step out, they'll be in New York City.
Oh, you're great. Look, have you seen The Music Man?
Nope.
Would you like to?
Sure.
I thought maybe we'd get a bite to eat first, and then we go.
Oh, you mean tonight?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't. I mean...
Now, again, this will be a callback later in the movie when the Jack Lemmon character says, oh, no, I have a date, and he goes over to the other side to the magazine rack. It's the same scene twice. One is an acceptance, and one is a kind of rejection when he thinks that he's got the promotion, but she's going off with Sheldrake.
So now the whole thing's more or less kaput.
Well, in that case, couldn't you...
No, I'm afraid not. I promised I'd have a drink with him. He's been calling me all week.
I understand.
And they step out onto the street. Now, Shirley had actually started on Broadway. She was in the chorus ensemble of Me and Juliet back in 1953. Then in 1954, she was in the chorus of The Pajama Game on Broadway, and she replaced the lead, Carol Haney, who had broken her ankle. Hal Wallace, the Hollywood producer, was in the audience, saw her in the lead, and brought her out to California. And her first movie, of course, was Hitchcock's The Trouble with Harry in 1955. Shirley MacLaine was only 25 when she got this movie. It was the movie that made her a leading lady. She was very nervous during the making of the film. She says that she only got 30 pages of the script and the rest of it was handed to her as scenes were written. And she would ask Audrey Wilder from time to time during production if she thought the scenes were any good because she was nervous that the movie wasn't going to work at all. Shirley MacLaine had already had her first Oscar nomination for Some Came Running. She would eventually be nominated 6 times for an Academy Award.
You had bumps, had measles, and you had your appendix out.
Don't mention the appendix to the fellas in the office, okay? I wouldn't want them to get the wrong idea about how you found out. Bye.
So we're in New York, obviously. We pan around here. And now we're going to follow Miss Kubelik to the Chinese restaurant, also shot in New York. Here we go. Wet down, very cold. She goes downstairs, and we go onto a set. Now, the layout of this place is very important, and also the design of it is very important. Once we get into the booth, they know her. They play the love theme from this movie. So she comes over, and there's a shadowy figure sitting there, and it turns out to be Mr. Sheldrake. Not so loud. He's more concerned with being seen.
Let me take your coat.
No, Jeff. I can't stay very long. Can I have a frozen daiquiri?
It's on the way. I see you went ahead and cut your hair.
That's right.
You know, I like...
So there's been a couple comments about her cutting her hair. And psychologically, why do people cut their hair? Why do they grow a beard, shave a beard off? Because they need a change, because there's something internal brewing that they're having trouble dealing with. Now, in this 50-52 shot, you really see what the design of the place is like. It's crazy. The place is a jumble. It's not a restful place at all. It's not a romantic place. There's diagonals, there's contrast, there's lights and darks, there's stripes. There's all kinds of nonsense going around. It's not a restful place. Behind Sheldrake right now is very little activity, but when we come back at the end and the New Year's Eve party is going, it's a zoo back there. And then behind Miss Kubelik, we have this quiet, slow-moving fish tank. Now, Wilder said, I would hate not to be taken seriously, but I would hate it even more if I was taken too seriously. I make movies, not cinema. So, for the spirit of Billy Wilder, to keep him from rolling over in his grave, I don't think we should overanalyze anything in his movies. He made very popular movies, and he called them movies. And so to dissect them one frame at a time, I think, would be a mistake.
And the girl? They don't make these shrimp like they used to.
I never said goodbye, Fran.
Now, this was a very tough scene for Shirley MacLaine. And if you look back at the script supervisor's records for this scene, you discover that her close-up right here with the shrimp, there were 24 takes done. And then they went on to the next letter of the slate and did an additional 22 takes. And in the additional 22 takes, there were no prints. Wilder generally only printed one take of every setup. When you look at the records, the last take was all he ever printed. But here, he printed several takes and went back the next day and did another 20 takes of the close-up. So this was a rough day for Shirley MacLaine and Billy Wilder to get the scene right. As the scene plays, of course, it's spectacularly perfect and the emotion is all there. But it must have been very tough that day, considering the number of takes that were done.
No, I have a date at 8:30.
Oh? Important?
Not very, but I'm going to be there anyway.
You ready to order dinner now?
No, dinner.
Just bring us 2 more drinks, will you?
So here we are in front of the Majestic Theater for real. This was shot very late at night after the play had actually ended. They were in New York for only 4 days, and they shot all night. And the night they shot this, they actually started, their call was 11 p.m. at night, and that's when they made that shot.
Fran, you remember that last weekend we had?
Do I? That leaky little bug?
Now, they're always in profile here, and then when we come around for the coverage, we're almost fully front on for Miss Kubelik, and we're at more of a 45-degree angle for Sheldrake. Now, again, that could be over-analysis, but it makes her more warm and friendly and makes him colder because you just don't come around and see him from a very attractive, friendly angle.
Just trust me, baby. We'll work it out somehow.
You're not being funny.
I wasn't trying.
Fran, if you'll just listen to me for a minute.
All right, I'm sorry.
Now, of course, the other reason that they're positioned this way in the scene is because of the end of the movie. Sheldrake needs to have a reason to turn around and put his back to Miss Kubelik so that she can disappear in the crowd in the New Year's Eve party. So again, it's all set up on purpose. They've come to this booth, this table, everyone knows who they are, and they'll return here to the same spot at New Year's Eve.
You know I do.
I.A.L. Diamond said that Miss Kubelik had to be sexy, funny, and sad, and that Shirley MacLaine could do all three. MacLaine said that working with Wilder was a 10-week acting class. He was happy to discuss anything in the script, but she said the script was so polished and he knew exactly how to play it that out of the discussions you would simply realize that Wilder was right. So there's Miss Olsen again. So they're not nearly as discreet as they should have been. Come out onto the street now, and we're back in New York, and they're going to head for the apartment.
And I love you, remember?
Where are we going? Not back to that leaky.
He's not going to let her go. He's not a very bright guy, but he is aggressive, and she is in love with him. Checks the note that Baxter wrote, and whenever we can, we pan down that street because we're not on the back lot. So there's the lonely guy music again. He's all alone. The Kleenex. And this is a great moment here. The one Kleenex actually gets away from him. He's the other piece of shredded Kleenex on the sidewalk. And he's really given up now. And we fade out. The fade-ins and fade-outs are very much from an older period of Hollywood. Billy Wilder's idol was Ernst Lubitsch, and if you look at the old Lubitsch movies, they all had fade-outs and dissolves, and this movie is full of both of them. So he won the bet, and he's going to take off. And we avoid the end of the room there. And he now has his bigger office. And the bigger office is going to mean a new wardrobe for him as well.
Yep.
Hi, buddy boy.
Now here come the Four Stooges.
Hi, fellas.
And they're a pretty hostile crowd. And what Dobitch does with his cigar here, he taps the ashes on his desk. That's in the script. When he goes to clean up the ashes, that's in the script too.
Gratitude-wise.
Oh, I'm very grateful.
Then why are you locking us out all of a sudden?
Well, it's been...
Now this is where the motivation for the close-ups on the calendar are going to come, even though they were cut out of the movie.
You won't play ball with us. Well, after all, it's my apartment. It's private property. It's not a public playground.
All right, so you got yourself a girl. That's okay with us, but not every night in the week.
How selfish can you get? Last week I had to borrow my nephew's car and take Sylvia to a drive-in in Jersey. I'm too old for that sort of thing. I mean, in the Volkswagen.
I sympathize with your problem. Believe me, I'm very sorry.
You'll be a lot sorrier before we're through with you.
Are you threatening me?
Listen, Baxter, we made you and we can break you.
Oh, good morning, Mr. Sheldrake.
Good morning, gentlemen. Everything satisfactory, Baxter? You like your office?
Yes, sir.
Now again, there's a good reason to use widescreen. Look how the staging fills up the entire frame from edge to edge. There's the cleanup of the cigar.
Yes, so long, fellas. Drop in any time. The door is always open. To my office.
Well, I like the way you handle that, Baxter. How does it feel to be an executive?
Oh, fine.
Sit down.
Now, this scene had a lot of pickups. The next day, they went back and redid a lot of the over-the-shoulders and the singles here, so there must have been a problem in the acting or the delivery. Generally, all the actors spoke exactly the words that were written in the script. The only one who paraphrased from time to time was the Fred McMurray character.
Your nose and everything, and, well, passing that key back and forth. Why take chances?
Yes, sir, you can't be too careful. Oh, I have something I think belongs to you.
Now, here's a big story point that's set up. This is going to be another one of those 2+2 issues. It's her compact mirror, and he says, the mirror's actually broken. This close-up right here was a pickup.
She threw it at me.
Sir?
Well, you know how it is. Sooner or later, they always give you a bad...
So we now have seen the mirror. We've seen the crack in it. It's interesting that Sheldrake is shown with a crack down the middle of his face. It says something about his character. So the exposition lays out the first two and the second two, and then the addition is going to come later.
All the dames you want. No headaches, no complications.
Yes, sir. That's the life, all right.
Oh, put me down for Thursday again.
Roger.
Put me down for Thursday, and I'll get the other key. Now he's going to take out the calendar, and this is where the first close-up of the calendar, writing it in and crossing out the other guys' names, came in.
Merry Christmas. I'll connect you. Merry Christmas.
This is the prelude to the Christmas party, and you can see how much everyone enjoys their work. As soon as they discover that there's a party somewhere in the building, they all take off.
On the 19th floor.
And here they are in the gigantic Alexander Trauner set again. We're going to move around, and we're going to get Edie Adams out here, who's going to spill the beans, and eventually the mirror. The story for The Apartment was based on a situation from a David Lean movie called Brief Encounter, which was based on a Noel Coward play. Billy Wilder actually saw the movie in 1945. And the plot is a married man and a married woman are having an affair in a friend's apartment. And the friend only had a scene or two, and Wilder thought to himself, he said in an interview, who was that guy who owned that flat where the lovers meet? Who was the friend who would let himself be exploited that way? And so Wilder put that aside back in 1945 and didn't bring it back to the top of the table until 1958-59 when he wrote The Apartment with Diamond. And Diamond said, although we had the character in the situation, we knew it was going to be about this guy who owns this apartment where these couples meet. We didn't have a plot. He said, until we heard about a local Hollywood scandal. The agent Jennings Lang was having an affair with Joan Bennett, who was his client, who was married to Walter Wanger. And Lang had been using the apartment of an underling at the agency, a lowly employee at a big company, to have his rendezvous. So he said, what if the lending was not an act of friendship, but rather a career promotion tactic? He said, what would it take to get ahead in the corporate world? And so they now had a plot. It was going to be about a guy who was going to loan his apartment to his boss so that he could go up the corporate ladder. Now, according to Tony Curtis, the apartment was actually based on his friend Nicky Blair's apartment. Curtis would borrow Nicky Blair's apartment for his extramarital affairs, and Tony Curtis said that the columnist Sid Skolsky wrote a treatment and sold it to Wilder. Now, it sounds more likely that it was David Lean's Brief Encounter, but both stories do exist.
He used to tell his wife I was the branch manager from Seattle 4 years ago, and we were having a little ring-a-ding-ding.
Oh, I'm sure I don't know what you're talking about.
Just before me, there was Miss Rossi in auditing, and after me, there was Miss Koch in disability, and right before you was a Miss, what's her name, on the 25th floor.
Would you excuse me?
What for? You haven't done anything. It's him. Oh, what a salesman. Always the last booth.
Here's Edie Adams a little bit drunk, and she does spill the beans. And essentially, she's Kubelik in 5 years. And this absolutely takes the wind out of Kubelik's sails. So here he comes with his drinks, and she's been told what's going on, and he doesn't really know anything about this yet.
Are you all right? What's the matter?
Nothing. There are just too many people here.
Why don't we step in?
They're going to go into his office. You notice that Jack Lemmon's tie has changed now. He's got the executive collar with the tie clasp underneath it.
Chairman of the board. Would you mind? Miss Kubelik, I would like your honest opinion. I've had this under
There's a new coat on the rack, and here comes the derby. And, of course, he looks like an idiot, and he acts like an idiot with this derby on. It's quite a funny image. And she's just thinking about what she's been told by Miss Olson. All this wild party going on in the background.
Really? You wouldn't be ashamed to be seen with somebody in a hat like this?
Of course not.
Maybe if I wore it a little more to one side. How's that? Is that better?
much better.
Well, since you wouldn't be ashamed to be seen with me, how
And
about
there's his new coat as well. So he's getting a little arrogant. The guy's getting a little cocky. He's got his first promotion, and he's spending his money. And he's actually getting out of his league a little bit.
I better get back to my elevator. I don't want to be fired.
You don't have to worry about that. I've got quite a bit of influence in personnel. You know Mr. Sheldrake?
Why?
Well, he and I are like that. He sent me a Christmas card.
Here's the Christmas card. In classic Billy Wilder fashion, one take.
Makes a cute picture.
I thought maybe I'd put in a word for you with Mr. Sheldrake, get you a little promotion. How would you like to be an elevator starter?
I'm afraid
And he's already promoting people. He's a little bit drunk, but he really can't handle the power. This is not the kind of guy he really is. He's phony. And here comes the second 2, and the 2 plus 2 equal 4.
Conservative firm. I don't want people to think I'm an entertainer.
And now he realizes that Miss Kubelik is the one seeing Mr. Sheldrake. The light on his face was not from the mirror, of course. It was from a special light brought in.
Makes me look the way I feel.
Both of these angles were also pickups. They were reshot after the first day of shooting on them.
Yes? Just a minute. If you don't mind, this is sort of personal.
Have a nice Christmas.
This is where you really see Jack Lemmon's range. It's going to get even greater as the film goes on. But the conflicting emotions that he has to play here, of being drunk, being in love, going to take his new expensive coat. There's his old hat, the old self that he's leaving behind. So the party is continuing unabated. Mr. Kirkaby is going to get the pearls. He probably bought them for her. And here comes Lemmon. Kirkaby's got to get another appointment up in the apartment. Baxter's so distraught that he doesn't even answer, but it's a setup for something that's going to come later on. Now you can actually see here that they've put up a false wall. It doesn't go down as far as it used to. Now again, Wilder is so specific. The script says the olives and the toothpicks are arranged in a fan shape. It's in the script. And it tells us how long he's been there and how much he's had to drink.
Hey, Charlie, give me a shot of bourbon and step on it. My sleigh is double parked.
We're going to introduce Hope Holiday here. She's the lonely lady at the end of the bar. She sees that he's a lonely guy in the middle of the bar. And this entire bit with the soda straws is, of course, in the script. First one hits him in the chest. Second one does the same. And the next soda straw is going to hit the rim of the hat, which is what's in the script. No reaction. Hope Holiday was also from Broadway. She was in the ensemble chorus of Little Abner. And she moved out here to be in the film version of Little Abner in 1959. The Apartment was really her first regular speaking role in a film.
Rum Collins and another one of these little mothers.
So she goes over and puts a dime in the jukebox and gets a song going, and now we have this kind of classic two-shot.
You like Castro? I mean, how do you feel about...
Wilder described this movie as the misuse of the American dream. It was infidelity as a way of life. Wilder had a sign over his desk for years which said, "How would Lubitsch do it?" And if you look back at Lubitsch films, their visual style, their staging, their rhythms, their camera work, the eloquent dialogue, and the great attention to detail, it's all in the Wilder films. They drink together. She's got a straw, he's got the martini glass.
Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring.
And then they're going to do it a second time. Wilder generally only printed one take. When he got the take that he liked, if it was take 1, take 15, take 25, he would print that one take, and the next day in dailies they would just see the one take. The movie was edited in about 2 weeks. The editor would be up to camera, and then 2 weeks after that they were done.
Come on, Fran, don't be that way.
Now look at the way the apartment is lit. This is not a comedy. This is film noir lighting. This is dark. This is scary. This is grim. Again, look at the composition spread way out to the edges of the 235 frame, really taking advantage of the whole thing. Wilder is very economical with his camera, and he said that if you don't need to cut, he won't. He will find the best place to put the camera that will tell the story. He says, I'm not going to lock the camera down. I'm going to have camera movement. I'm going to recompose to come up with the best shot. But the camera can never call attention to itself. The camera must always be less important than the story and the characters.
Idiot. A million laughs.
Well, that's a little more like it. At least you're speaking to me.
A funny thing happened to me at the office party today. I ran into your secretary, Miss Olson.
Again, even with the small apartment, the way it's been designed, staged, and photographed, it has tremendous depth. You see all the way back into both rooms. You never feel claustrophobic in here. But at the same time, it has a completely opposite feel from the office itself. The office is a giant, impersonal place. It's all straight lines. Here in the apartment, there's all kinds of curves. The bentwood chairs, the bentwood bed that we'll see in a minute, the archway. The apartment is very dark. One of their plans was to have no white objects in the apartment. Everything would be darker. It was supposed to be a snug haven away from the office. And so on purpose, there are two completely different visual worlds.
How could I be so stupid? You'd think I would have learned by now. When you're in love with a married man, you shouldn't wear mascara.
And there's the great line about the mascara. It's Christmas Eve, Fran. This pathetic little Christmas tree. And now she gives him a present. In the original script, she did not give him a present. He just gave her the $100. But in a rewrite that came just before shooting, they added her gift to him.
We better keep it here.
Yeah, we better.
Oh, I have a present for you.
Now he actually, of course, has no present at all. He gives her $100, like a John would give a hooker. Great look. Puts it right in her purse, without an insert, in the same shot. Good filmmaking. Now, when the film was released, the Canadians wanted this dialogue cut.
If we hadn't wasted all this time, I have to get home and trim the tree.
Okay. I just thought as long as it was paid for.
Don't ever talk like that, Frank.
As long as it was paid for was the line they objected to. In order to show the movie in Canada, the studio was supposed to remove that.
The apartment.
Stop it, Fran.
You'll miss your train.
Again, the lighting, the backlighting, the contrasty angle of the lighting, much more like noir. And then, of course, he's got all these real packages for his family and had nothing for her other than a $100 bill. And this gives us an important story point here. He's going to leave her in the apartment. It's a great plot point. Wilder said, the more completely you can disguise your plot points, the better story you'll have. And it's perfectly disguised here. She's going to commit suicide now. She needs to be alone.
Careful lipstick.
Merry Christmas.
Look at the framing right in the middle of the archway with all these curly cues and circles in them. Completely different visual design from The Office. And of course, all of this is in the script. Puts down the record. So she plays the record. It's their love theme from the Chinese restaurant. And she's so overcome by grief that she really can't go into the bathroom yet. She stops, and turns back, and kind of buries her head. And this is in the script. Now she's going to discover the pills. And for the audience, this is the first time they understand that the pills exist. Had the scene earlier with Baxter taking the sleeping pill been left in, we would have known they're already there. It's going to come as a bit more of a surprise. Again, it's a mirror. Wilder likes mirrors. And here it is. And she brings the pills in. And on a big screen, you can read what it is. It's Seconal. Music is building here. There's the $100, the sleeping pills, and she really can't decide what to do. Puts the lipstick away. So she's not going to fix her face. Very film noir, heavy dramatic music. Now we cut back here, and in the turn we get the reveal of this goofy dancing they're doing. They turn into it, so we see the dangling arms. Cutting from a very heavy moment, a woman who's probably going to commit suicide, we believe, to this drunk couple dancing and this overstuffed Santa Claus drinking at a bar.
Hey, knock it off, will you? Go home.
Now, the film is about to take a 180-degree turn. It's been a fairly light romance up to this point. We have this silly scene with the two of them dancing. They've gotten drunk. But it's going to turn very dark and heavy. The prelude to that has already occurred. The apartment is dark and dramatic. We've had the scene with Kubelik and Sheldrake, and like the lights going out here, the movie is going to get darker now. So, drunk, they're going to stumble home. We're on the back lot here. And we find out that she's married too, and that her husband is in jail in Cuba.
Not particularly.
He's so cute. 5'2", 99 pounds.
He's going to go to bed with a married woman. He's drunk and lonely and very upset.
Can I ask you a personal question?
No.
You got a girlfriend?
She may be a girl. She is no friend of mine.
Still stuck on her, huh?
Stuck on her? Obviously, you do not know me very well.
I don't know you at all.
Permit me.
Good jokes here. Wilder and Diamond are keeping it light because the lighter they can keep things now, the heavier they will be when he discovers Kubelik passed out on his bed. So we're going to come in now, and in the living room we're going to have one long take. A lot of business here, a lot to do. 19 takes to get this right.
I think it's only fair to warn you, you are now alone with a notorious sex pot.
No kidding.
Ask anybody around here. As a matter of fact, when it's time for me to go, and I may go just like that, I have promised my body to the Columbia Medical Center.
Gee, sort of gives you goosebumps just to think about it.
Well, they haven't got me yet, baby. Dig up some ice from the kitchen, and let's not waste any more time. Preliminary-wise.
I'm with you, lover.
Critically, the audience loved the movie. The critics themselves were mixed in some cases. The Chicago newspapers found the movie an alarming indication of lowering moral standards. They thought it was lecherous and slimy. Esquire said the movie had no taste. It sandwiches pathos and slapstick together with no transitions at all. So he thinks that something's been left behind by Sheldrake and Kubelik. He throws them in the back room, and here we go. Now, this is lit as dramatically as anything in Sunset Boulevard. Different cinematographer, but amazingly dramatic. She's unconscious.
The management would appreciate it if you get the hell out of here.
Still doesn't understand the ramifications of it.
I used to like you. I used to like you a lot. Well, it's all over between us, so beat it. O-U-T out!
And then he realizes she's unconscious, and he finds the pill bottle, which we've seen once, and he realizes that she's emptied the bottle.
My God. Miss Kubelik? Miss Kubelik?
And now he has to get rid of his date. And this again is in one long take.
I broke a nail trying to get the tray out. You want to buy yourself a new refrigerator. I didn't mean right.
The critics called this movie a dirty little fairy tale, and Wilder said, it's not how life could be, it's how life is. Originally, Wilder felt that the plot for this movie would never pass the motion picture code and that they would have to write it as a play and do it on Broadway.
Hey, over here, lover. What's all the running around about? You're going to wear yourself out. Not so rough, honey.
Good night.
Good night.
Party's over.
What's the matter? Did I do something wrong?
It's an emergency. I'll see you soon.
So he's going to toss her out now. And Dr. Dreyfus is going to go after Miss Kubelik.
Here anyway.
Nothing, will you please just get out?
My shoes. Some lover you are. Some sex pot.
Here, find a phone booth and call your husband in Atlanta.
You bet I will. And when I tell him how you treated me, he'll push your face in. Your face.
She gonna be all right, Doc?
How many pills are in that bottle?
It was half full, about a dozen or so. You gonna have to take her to the hospital?
Originally, the studio wanted Groucho Marx to play Dr. Dreyfus. Wilder had wanted to do a movie with the Marx Brothers, but knew that he needed an actor with more weight and someone who could bring more seriousness to the role. Again, here's the story point, lighting the gas stove. So the movie gets very dark now and heavy. They're going to have to save her. They're going to have to pump her stomach, give her the coffee, and walk her around. And this is a kind of reality that's very difficult for C.C. Baxter to take. He's really concerned about his job. Sees the envelope which has the $100 in it. Doesn't really know what to do with it.
Bring my bag. Roll up the right sleeve. Hold that. Nice veins. Want to tell me what happened?
I don't know. I mean, I wasn't even here. You see, we had
Baxter is still unable to really face the reality of what's going on, and he's still keeping up the ruse that he's the gigolo. He does that through the whole movie.
So you went right out and picked yourself up another dame?
Something like that.
You know, Baxter, you're a real cutie pie. Yes, you are. If you'd come home half an hour later, you would have had quite a Christmas present.
These are real slaps. The sound is enhanced, but they're real slaps. And Wilder had a doctor on the set as a medical advisor to get this right. And the doctor actually insisted that Kubelik be slapped much more often and much harder than she is in this particular scene. He did 6 takes and printed the 5th and 6th take, but wasn't going to slap her any harder. The hardest slaps are actually off camera. And the script is extremely specific about breaking open the ammonia ampules, slapping her, her moaning. It's not ad-libbed. Again, Trauner's set allows people to go back in depth and stay in frame.
What's her name?
So they're now going to nurse Kubelik back to consciousness. Billy Wilder had what he called his screenwriting tips. Wilder said that the audience is fickle, and you always have to be aware of the fact that they can turn on you at any minute. He said you need to grab them by the throat and never let them go. He said you must have a clean line of action for your leading character. You have to know where you're going at all times in the story. The more subtle and elegant you can make your plot points, the better you are as a writer. He said if you have a problem with Act 3, the real problem is going to be in Act 1. He said if you use voiceovers, don't describe what the audience is already seeing. Add to what they're seeing. Now, this movie was unusual in that it opened with a voiceover narration. It's actually exposition, and it never comes back in the film. And he was criticized at the time. People said, well, if you have narration at the beginning of your film, you need to have it all the way through. And he said, no, you don't. We needed it at the beginning. We didn't need it anymore. He's making up a new rule. He was right. Back to his tips, he said that the event that ends Act 2 will trigger the end of the movie. And we'll see that that's true in a minute. And that Act 3 must build and build in tempo and action until the last event. And then that's it. Don't hang around. Of course, when the last event occurs at the end of this movie, the movie is over within a minute and a half. It's very, very fast. Wilder told his actors that the script was not the 10 Commandments. It was the 10 suggestions. And he said, if you have ideas, tell me in rehearsal. We'll try everything. But once we start shooting on the set, then it's too late. So to get through a scene like this, a very difficult, emotional scene, you can see how Wilder, with an economy of staging, very, very simple camera work, makes us focus in on the actors and what Kubelik is going through here without making it disgusting or without making it overly dramatic.
Well, it's not important. The main thing is I got here in time. You're going to be all right. Isn't she, Doc?
I'm so tired.
Come on, drink this.
Please, just let me sleep.
No, you can't sleep, Fran. Open your eyes. Let's get her walking. We got to keep her awake for the next few hours. Now, come on, Fran. Walk! Walk! 1, 2, 3.
Then we have this low camera angle. And we're going to have what's basically a passage of time.
And 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you got it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Walk, friend. 1.
Originally, he wanted the camera angle to be even lower, and Lachelle argued with him and won.
Right.
Now she's in bed, and we get a really good look for the first time at the bentwood bed, which will be a very good, important visual element behind her when she wakes up.
When she wakes up. Just as long as she's okay.
This cases are harder on the doctor than on the patient. I ought to charge you about a mile. Any of that coffee left?
Yeah.
Dr. Dreyfus and his wife are the opposite people from the world of the office. Everyone in the office, all the middle managers who exploit Baxter, are horrible people. They're not loyal. They're narcissistic. Dreyfus is a real friend. It's here that he's going to give us the morality of the movie. He's going to tell him to be a mensch, to be a human being.
No suicide note or anything. Believe me, Doc, I'm not thinking about myself.
Aren't you?
It's just, she's got a family, and there's the people at the office. Look, Doc, can't you forget you're a doctor? Let's just say you're here as a neighbor.
Well, as a doctor, I guess I can't prove it wasn't an accident. But as your neighbor, I'd like to kick your keys to clear around the block. Mind if I cool this off?
Yeah, help yourself.
I don't know what you did to that girl in there, and don't tell me. But it was bound to happen the way you carry on. Live now, pay later, Diners Club. Why don't you grow up, Baxter? Be a mensch. You know what?
There's the morality of the movie, be a mensch. At the end, he's going to say that when he's talking to Sheldrake. He realizes that he's not been a human being at all. He's been a little worm who's been used by everyone in the office.
Well, you know where I am if you need me.
This next section of the movie gets very tender. People criticized Billy Wilder for being so cynical and acerbic. And this sequence coming up is so sweet and tender that it's really difficult to say that Billy Wilder can't be both cynical and tender. He's exhausted, and he's just so happy that she's okay. Previews were very important to Billy Wilder. In the first preview for this movie went great. Wilder once said about his audiences, he said, "An audience is never wrong. An individual audience member may be an imbecile, but when you get 1,000 imbeciles together in a dark room, they're a critical genius." Wilder said, "I think that audiences are pretty smart. As soon as you say, I don't give a damn whether you come to my movie or not, what's my next movie, there will be no next movie." So he was very concerned with the reaction of the audience, how the movie played. And he was aware of it when he shot, edited, and, of course, at the previews.
He was out on a case.
I'm warning you, Mr. Baxter. This is a respectable house, not a honky-tonky. Come on, Oscar.
Operator, I want White Plains, New York, Mr. J.D. Sheldrake. Make that person to person.
So here's Sheldrake's house. It's huge. It's the opposite of Baxter's apartment. He's got 2 kids. They're all in their Christmas morning bathrobes.
Why don't we put a fly in the nose cone? See if we can bring it back alive.
Hey, that's a thought.
Maybe we should put in 2 flies.
Here's his son, and the kid suggests that maybe if they put 2 flies in the nose cone of the rocket ship, they'll propagate in space. And Sheldrake's embarrassed by that. kind of a double standard. So he says, thanks, Jeff. His kid is named Jeff. He's Jeff, too. So he's named his kid after himself. It's kind of an ego thing, Jeff Jr. And he's got this brand new, gorgeous silk bathrobe. Here's Baxter. He's a mess. He's got a 5 o'clock shadow. He's been up all night. And, of course, Sheldrake looks fine. Now, another thing that happens here is we're going to introduce Mrs. Sheldrake. Up to now, she's just been named. But she's going to figure into the plot a little bit later when she divorces her husband. So bringing her on camera, finding a good reason to do that without making it obvious, is really terrific. She's obviously just as uptight and conservative as her husband is.
Just how serious is it?
Well, it was touch and go there for a while.
Look at the difference. The dark, dingy, dramatic apartment, and then the very bright, white. Looks more like The Office. The great, bright set. Two separate worlds, two separate kinds of people.
A letter. Would you like me to open it and read it to you? Well, it's just a suggestion. No.
Almost like this is one genre and the shot of Sheldrake is a completely different genre. Very bold to do in one film. Works great.
Friend of mine, so we were very lucky in that respect. Actually, he thinks she's my girl. No, he just jumped to the conclusion. Around here, I'm known as quite a ladies' man. Of course, we're not out of the woods yet. Sometimes they try it again. Yes, sir, I'll do my best. It looks like it'll be a couple of...
They've already established that her dress is hanging on the door. That'll be needed later in the film when Kirkaby comes for his 4 o'clock appointment.
Isn't there some sort of message you want me to give her? Well, I'll think of something. Yes, sir.
And Sheldrake is completely uncompassionate here. Really shocks Baxter. He doesn't realize what a cold, icy lizard Sheldrake really is, because he's really never looked at the situation before. He's only been looking at it from his perspective and how he can get his promotions. So he's going to put her back in bed. And we're going to start a long sequence now where Kubelik and Baxter essentially play house. It's like they're married. They're two relaxed, comfortable people together, and they get to know each other. They have a romantic situation, and they get to like each other. This is just the beginning of it.
Sure I do. It's always nice to have company for Christmas. I'm stronger than you are, Miss Kubelik.
I just want to brush my teeth.
Oh, of course. I think I can find a new toothbrush somewhere here.
Gives her a bathrobe. Now look how different her bathrobe is from Sheldrake's bathrobe. He had a brand new silk, kind of icy cold bathrobe, and Kubelik gets this flannel plaid, soft robe to put on. Baxter hides the razor blades because he's so nervous that she might try to commit suicide again. Scared for his own job, but he's also worried that he doesn't want to go through another night like he's had.
No, I don't want to.
I'll fix you some coffee. Oh. We're all out of coffee. You had quite a lot last night.
Again, look how Trauner's designed the set so that you can see the bathroom and the bed at the same time. Always depth in the shot. We're never cut off in a little tiny space. They make use of the anamorphic lens all the time. So this is Mrs. Dreyfus, and her big scene is coming up. The critics felt that Mrs. Dreyfus was overplayed, that she was exaggerated too much. Wilder said that actually she was underplayed. Mrs. Dreyfus was based on a neighbor that Wilder had as a boy in Vienna growing up, and he said that the real Mrs. Dreyfus was much more exaggerated. So Baxter is more concerned at this point with following Sheldrake's orders of keeping this private and keeping it quiet. He's worried that he'll offend Sheldrake in some way and lose his job. So he won't let her make phone calls. He won't let her write a note to Mrs. Sheldrake later. He's still Sheldrake's messenger. Wilder said that Jack Lemmon was his favorite actor. He said, if an actor is like a retail store, an actor offers certain commodities to the public. He said most actors can offer one or two types of items, but then there's nothing left on their shelves. He said Jack Lemmon is like Macy's, Gimbel's, and the Sears Roebuck catalog all rolled up into one. He can do anything. How Billy Wilder got to Hollywood is an interesting story. He was actually born Samuel Wilder in 1906, and Billy was a nickname that his mother gave him. He went to the University of Vienna, and he studied law, but he dropped out, and he began a career in journalism in Vienna. And then in 1926, Wilder joined a jazz band, and he went to Berlin. In Berlin, he worked for a newspaper. He wrote crime stories and sports stories. One of his jobs was to go around to the families of crime victims or the families of criminals who were in jail and ask them for photographs for the newspaper. He said it was a strange, kind of creepy job that he had to do, but it gave him a lot of ideas for stories. Berlin at this time was a real mecca for artists. Bertolt Brecht was working, Schoenberg, the Bauhaus group was going strong. Berlin was a very artistically active place. Billy Wilder sold his first screenplay in 1929 to the UFA studios in Germany, and his first screenplay was called A Hell of a Reporter. So obviously he drew on his experiences for his first script. In 1930, he collaborated with Fred Zinnemann and the Siodmak brothers and Edgar Ulmer, who were all working in Germany at the time, on a film which was very famous for its day called People on Sunday. That gave him enough courage to begin working as a screenwriter. This is the character actress, Naomi Stevens. Now watch Baxter leave here. He's going to turn and look back right there. That's in the script. That's how specific Wilder and Diamond were. That last look before he turned the corner is in the script.
Fine boy he seemed when he first moved in here. Clean and cut, a regular Ivy Leaguer. Turns out he's King Farouk. With the drinking, with the cha-cha, with the no napkins. A girl like you for the rest of your life. You want to cry in your noodle soup? Who needs...
Naomi Stevens started in New York. She was a Broadway actress. Then she came out to California, where she played this character in dozens of television shows.
Sleeping pills. For what? For whom? For some good time, Charlie?
Shh. One napkin coming up. Wish we had some champagne to wrap it around.
What did I tell you?
Again, look at the composition. Spread out wide for the wide screen with Lemon on the far left and Shirley MacLaine on the right. So she looks like a little kid in bed. It's going to get even more endearing. There on the wall, the posters from the museum. Wilder and Diamond figured that when Baxter would be waiting outside of his apartment, he would walk down to the museum and to kill time, walk around, maybe buy a museum print, and that's what's on the walls.
There's nothing here but a $100 bill.
That's right.
So he's discovered the $100 now. This is all played in one. This is the first beat of the scene, and we won't cut in until we get to the second beat. It's a way of directorially and visually dividing up the scene.
I'm not very good at it.
Yeah, I am. Let me get the cards.
You don't have to entertain me, Mr.
Now we're going to cut to him, and when we come back, we'll be in the next beat.
Guess what I did last Christmas? Had an early dinner at the Automat, went to the zoo, and then I came home and cleaned up after Mr. Reichelberger. He had a little eggnog party here. So I'm way ahead this year. 3 across, spades double, high deals. 6, 8.
Now, the gin rummy games actually came out of rehearsal. Shirley MacLaine had been working with the Rat Pack, and they were very big gin rummy players. Now, if you watch the background here, watch the shadow and the lighting on the bentwood headboard, and you'll see that it changes from shot to shot. There were pickups and additional close-ups made here, all very close, but actually with a little bit of shifting. They didn't duplicate the reshoots perfectly.
Queen.
I don't want it.
Pick a card.
What do you call it when somebody keeps getting smashed up in automobile accidents?
Bad insurance risk?
Joseph Lachelle, the cinematographer, was a well-versed studio-trained cinematographer with a wide range of credits, including The Long Hot Summer, and then at the other end of the spectrum, I Was a Teenage Werewolf. He shot Marty, and he shot sections of How the West Was Won. He also shot Barefoot in the Park and a bunch of comedies for Norman Torog. He would go on to do 3 more films with Wilder, Irma la Douce, Kiss Me Stupid, and Fortune Cookie. This was their first film together, and the relationship was great.
For falling in love with the wrong guy in the wrong place at the wrong time.
How many guys...
Wilder was always concerned that the camera direct the audience to see something. He was always saying, how do you get their eye to look in the right place in the frame? And you can see how Lachelle has lit this, where the brightest object is Shirley MacLaine's face in the close-up, and everything else drops back from there. But the face doesn't feel overexposed. It's all been brought down so that it looks really beautiful.
I applied for a job at Consolidated, but I flunked the typing test.
Too slow?
No, I can type up a story.
Wilder asked the director, Richard Brooks, if the night before shooting a scene, Brooks would sit down and work out the camera angles. And Richard Brooks said, no, the night before I shoot a scene, I go over the script and see if there's anything I can make better by rewriting it. Where Wilder would put the camera would usually be based on rehearsals that would go on the beginning of each day. He would have an approximate idea of how to stage it and where the action was going to take place. But sometimes they would rehearse all morning and not begin shooting until the afternoon.
Maybe he does love me, only he doesn't have the nerve to tell his wife.
I'm sure that's the explanation.
You really think so?
No doubt about it.
Would you hand me that pad and pencil?
What for?
I'm going to write a letter to Mrs. Sheldrake.
You what?
As one woman to another, I'm sure she'll understand.
I don't think...
Again, look at the composition, how they're not afraid to push the actors out to the far edges on both sides. Cinematographers are always afraid of that, and directors tend to push things towards the middle of the frame. But by moving them all the way out, the wide screen takes on a visual quality that is unique. And even though this is a movie about basically two people, they use the wide screen and they fill it up constantly so that you don't feel you're watching a TV show on a wide screen. You feel you're really watching a widescreen movie.
Since 2040, 52.
She's so comfortable and she's so relaxed that she's able to fall asleep. She's comfortable. And when Baxter finally realizes that, and in the script it says, mid-shuffle, he looks up and sees that she's asleep. Here it comes. Right there. And she's like a little kid in bed. And he's the boyfriend and both parents. And so really tenderly, he puts her to sleep here. And emotionally, he's just so spent, and he's so happy. He realizes he needs to shave. Tucks his collar inside his shirt so he doesn't get soap and water on it. Very 60s thing to do. And now here comes Kirkaby and his gal. And there's two important things that happen here with Kirkaby. And, of course, just showing up in a VW Bug is great. And, of course, we're on the back lot here. This is not in New York. Now, Kirkaby serves two purposes. He thinks it's Mrs. Dreyfus for the tray.
All right, Mrs. Dreyfus.
There's the dress on the door, which is important because the door can't close tight. Here's Kirkaby.
What do I want? Just a minute.
You can't come in here.
What's the matter with you, buddy boy? I made a reservation for 4 o'clock, remember?
He sets down the champagne. The champagne's going to be the champagne that's popped at the end of the movie. That's how the bottle of champagne gets in there. So that's important. It's also important that he see that someone's in the bedroom.
La 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 la.
And of course, this continues the myth that C.C. Baxter is a playboy.
What's holding things up?
They turn, brings him to the door. He's going to throw him out. This is the first time he's thrown out one of these guys. And of course, Kirkaby sees that it's Kubelik. And he's thrilled. He's happy to leave now. He understands. He's part of the boys' club. But more importantly, Baxter has thrown someone out. It's a complete change for him. He's a different guy. In the past, he would have said, fine, I'll get out. He would have done anything so that he could get that promotion.
Who's that?
Just somebody delivering a box.
Wilder first decided he wanted to be a director when he was still in Germany. He had written a scene where people come into a restaurant and they have to wear a tie. And there's a doorman who checks each person as they enter the restaurant to make sure they're wearing a tie. And a guy comes to the door with a long beard, and the doorman has to lift up the beard to see if the guy has a tie on. That was the bit. So Wilder writes the scene, they photograph it, and when Wilder sees it in dailies, the guy walks up to the front of the restaurant and he has a goatee. So Wilder thought, all right, I've got to direct in the future someday because they're not getting what I want.
Yeah, well, that's the way it crumbles, cookie-wise.
That's the way it crumbles cookie-wise. She's going to use that on Sheldrake in a little while. And there's that background, foreground again. Never just a blank, dead wall, but we can see out into the bedroom. There she is snuggled up, and here he is shaving. I realize that something's wrong, of course, and he has the blades in his pocket.
Miss Olson, will you come into my office, please?
So Sheldrake is going to fire Olson, and it's going to be in one camera setup. It doesn't need any more than that. Wilder is going to use close-ups and cuts when he needs them for dramatic emphasis, and this doesn't need that.
Thank you for giving that little pep talk to Miss Kubelik at the office party.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jeff. You know, I never could hold my liquor.
Well, I thought you could...
So he turns his back to her.
It won't happen again.
You bet it won't. I'll arrange for you to get a month's severance pay.
Music is dramatic. He has to let her go because she told Kubelik what's been going on.
Oh, you were cruel enough to make me sit out there and watch the new models pass by.
I'd appreciate it if you'd be out of here as soon as you can.
Yes, Mr. Sheldrake.
Operator, this is Mr. Sheldrake. I'd like Mr. Baxter's home telephone number. That's C.C. Baxter. He's an ordinary premium accountant.
So he's going to call Baxter at his apartment to check in, which is the plot point we need so that she can listen in, so that she can be motivated to call Mrs. Sheldrake and tell her what's been happening.
Hello, Baxter. Jeff Sheldrake. Can you talk?
Yes, she's in the shower. She's coming along.
And the intercutting here between the office and the apartment are so obvious. Look how the apartment is dark and curved and kind of snuggly and warm. And look how the office is straight lines, all verticals, much colder place. In production, Wilder never shot protection shots. He didn't do cutaways or close-ups to let him get out of a take early. He would shoot until he got the take that he knew was right, and that was the only take that was printed. He didn't want to give the studio extra footage. He knew if there were close-ups and cutaways and things like that, the studio could go back in and recut the movie. If they only had a master that flowed into close-ups and singles and two shots, that would be all they'd have to work with. And they couldn't recut the movie. So it forced him to not only be smart about camera placement and editing, but it also allowed him to keep control over what he was doing. He didn't want his films changed by anybody else. He wanted the control. In 1933, Hitler's rise to power was evident in Germany, and Wilder, who was Jewish, fled and went to Paris. And he stayed there about a year, and then Columbia hired him and brought him to the United States. He got a 6-month visa, and he arrived speaking no English at all. And there were large groups of German immigrants who were already in Hollywood and would meet in the evenings and talk German. And Billy avoided them. Instead, he went to night school to learn English. He dated American girls. He listened to the American radio, and he bought books to read that were all in English. Even then, his first scripts were in German, and they had to be translated by friends into English.
I never took those pills. I never loved you. We never even...
This is when you see how smart Miss Kubelik is. She says, I'm not here. I was never here. I was never supposed to be here. She's smarter than he is. She understands what the relationship really is.
Goodbye, friend.
He's really just as dumb and narcissistic as the group downstairs. He just has more money and a little more power. So Miss Olson calls the wife and makes a lunch date. Again, this is a big plot point. This is the point that's going to turn the tables for Sheldrake on one level. He's going to get nailed twice. He's going to lose Kubelik, and he's going to be divorced. And again, the plot point is set up very smoothly and very invisibly. He's such a creep. He dated her for a while, and now he's fired her.
I'm on my way. Just making a personal call. Here's a dime.
All the straight lines in the office, squares, rectangles. Not at all like the apartment itself. So here we are in the back lot. He's coming home. And we're going to have a momentary dramatic situation that's actually going to be called back.
Oh, Mr. Baxter, I'm glad you're here. I was just going to get the pass key.
What for?
I thought I smelled gas coming.
Smells gas. He's worried that she's committing suicide. He races up there. Races in. And that's exactly what's going to happen at the end when Miss Kubelik hears the champagne and thinks it's a gunshot. Look at the apartment set again. You get both rooms at the same time. And she's got the sock hanger that was in the scene at the beginning of the movie that was cut when Baxter went into the bathroom to wash his socks, get a sleeping pill. So this is actually a callback. The first time has just been cut out. He's dressed differently now. He's casual. This is all in the script. The cardigan, the loose neck on the shirt, all in the script. And now they're going to play house. She's got on this comfy, cozy bathrobe. He's the husband. She's the wife. His tennis racket is what he uses for a strainer. So clearly between the TV dinner and the strainer, this is not a guy who cooks for himself ever. He doesn't really know how to cook much of anything. They're going to make spaghetti and meatballs, but this is a guy who was lonely and quiet and didn't do anything at all.
Lipstick, a pair of false eyelashes, and a swizzle stick from the store club.
It's just that I'm the kind of guy who can't say no. I don't mean to girls. I mean
to someone like Mr. Sheldrake.
This is where they basically fall in love.
I know so. He's a taker.
What?
Some people take, some people get took. And they know they're getting took, and there's nothing they can do about it.
Well, I wouldn't say that. What would you like to have for dinner? Huh? Hey, onion soup and canned asparagus.
I really should be getting home. My family will be flipping by now.
Oh, you can't leave yet. The doctor said it takes 48 hours to get that stuff out of your system.
I wonder how long it takes to get someone you're stuck on out of your system. If only they'd invent some kind of pump for that.
I know how you feel, Miss Kubelik. You think it's the end of the world, but it's not. I went through exactly the same thing myself.
Here's a great moment where Lemon does something that most actors could not do. He's got to show how to commit suicide and make it funny. And because of the natural personality that Lemon brings to the screen and his ability to keep things light, he's able to say, I bought a gun, and how do I commit suicide?
You're reading the papers all the time that people shoot themselves? Believe me, it's not that easy. I mean, how do you do it? Here? Here? Here?
Right there. That's cute. It's almost 3 cute ways to commit suicide. Where do you point the gun? And he shoots himself in the knee.
Sitting there trying to make up my mind. A cop stuck his head in the car because I was illegally parked, and I tried to hide the gun under the seat, and it went off.
Oh, that's terrible.
Well, it was a year before I could bend the knee. But I got over the girl in 3 weeks.
And they lighten this whole moment up with Cincinnati, Ohio, and he's going to get a fruitcake.
Are you just making this up to make me feel better?
Of course not. Here's the fruitcake.
Now he's going to show her his knee, rolls up his pants. So we've got Jack Lemmon talking about suicide with a fruitcake in one hand and one pants leg up. Perfect.
Yes, nurse.
Now we introduce the brother-in-law. This is the character actor, Johnny Seven. These scenes were shot on December 26th, the day after Christmas. Now, who wants to come in on December 26th and shoot anything? So in true studio fashion, they scheduled scenes without the principal characters. But Wilder had to come to work, and the secondaries are all there.
Thanks.
So yesterday afternoon, I take Sylvia up to the apartment, and guess who he's got stashed away in the bedroom?
Who?
Kubelik.
No kidding. Buddy Boy and Kubelik having themselves a little toot?
Toot? More like a lost weekend.
More Like a Lost Weekend is a reference, of course, to Billy Wilder's The Lost Weekend, kind of a backhanded plug for his own film.
Up at the Guggenheim Museum.
And here we see the true character and nature of these guys if we hadn't figured it out before. They're completely fickle, and they're willing to sell out anyone. They have no loyalty at all. They're the opposite of the Dreyfus family.
Well, she lives with us, and my wife is getting pretty nervous on account of Frank hasn't been home for the past 2 days.
That's so?
Anyway, we was wondering if somebody in the office knew what happened to her.
I see. What do you think, Al? Can we help the man?
Why not? We don't owe Buddy Boy anything.
Yeah. What's Buddy Boy done for us lately?
Who is Buddy Boy?
And now Jack Lemmon's really revved up. The singing, the body language. This is probably the most famous scene in the movie, the tennis racket and the spaghetti scene. And it's all in the script, but it's going to take someone like Lemmon to make this absolutely easy and entertaining and funny and romantic.
So you're pretty good with that racket.
You should see my backhand. Where do you see me serve the meatballs?
Shall I light the candles?
It's a must. Gracious living lives.
So dramatically, we're going to get lighter and lighter and more romantic here so that when the brother-in-law comes in, we can crash all the way to the ground. All of Billy Wilder's movies were made in the studio system, and he liked the studio system very much. He said that he preferred to shoot his movies in a studio rather than go on location because he had much more control when he was inside the studio. He said, I like the studio system very much. He said, I shoot quickly, I stay on schedule, I've never missed a day, and I'm on budget. He said, I'm an honorable and reliable director. I'm not egocentric or indulgent. So he said, I don't have any trouble with the studio at all. Wilder said that there's 3 kinds of atmospheres on a working set, and he defined each one. Said the first type of atmosphere is a church-like mood where everyone is doing something very important. The second type of work atmosphere on a set was bedlam and confusion, he said, where the movie is simply a byproduct of the chaos that's going on. And the third type of atmosphere on a set, Wilder thought, was the concentration camp, where any tiny little thing might disturb the reigning genius, which must be avoided at all costs. Wilder didn't like any of those kinds of atmospheres. He suggested the Wilder method, which had nothing to do with the Stanislavski method, he said, or the Strasberg method. Wilder's method was like a Viennese coffee house. He said, you have fun, you play games, there's intelligent conversation, but beneath the whipped cream is the determination to do one's best work. And this scene is great on that. It's a nice, wonderful 3-shot master. Look how they're spread out now in the shot. And it forces the cut to Lemmon, which is so great, and then the cut to the brother-in-law, stone-faced. And then he tries a different technique, unmoved. And again, when you cut to the brother-in-law, look at the great depth in the shot. The front door is left open. You see the stairs. You see back into the kitchen. It's great. It's visually beautiful.
Murder, driving a cab in New York. I mean, with that cross-town traffic.
Oh, he spills his drink, which is also in the script. Here comes Dr. Dreyfus. Perfect reason to leave the door open. It's also in the script. This is in one now. This is one nice long take, and we're now going to have a very fast volley coming up when the brother-in-law punches Lemmon.
Fran been sick or something?
No, just a little accident.
What does he mean, accident?
Well, these things happen all the time.
What things? Say, what kind of a doctor are you anyway?
Not that kind of doctor.
There she is, and now we have this great foreshot. And they're going to start to go. Now the run low is going to come all the way up. This is all in one, and we need it in one because we want the power of that and that. 2 quick cuts, bang, bang. Low angle to hold Lemmon in the shot. Come down here. Again, taking full advantage of that wide screen. It's not just the photography, it's the production design and the lighting.
Bye, Doctor.
Baxter is thrilled. He's been knocked out and finally feels like something. He's in love with a girl and he got punched out on account of being in love with someone. He's a man now. He's not a worm. He's not a schlemiel. And he's thrilled.
Don't bother, Doc. Doesn't hurt a bit.
Wilder's idea was to keep everyone as loose as possible on the set. At night, they used to go into Lemmon's dressing room, which they had dubbed Dirty Harry's, and they would have impromptu entertainment. They'd mix drinks. They'd have martinis at the end of the day. During the day, the cast and crew were encouraged to entertain each other. They did play gin rummy on the set. They had football betting pools. They bet on the horses. And the reason for all of it, according to Wilder, was to stay loose. He said the relaxation and the sheer fun on the set was important because it produced fine performances and gave people the extra energy they needed to get through the rough spots. It was the atmosphere he needed on the set. His first script was a minor picture for Ruby Keeler about a country girl who meets a group of gangsters in New York and unwittingly helps them to launder or counterfeit money. Wilder actually had the idea while still in Germany when he would watch American films like 42nd Street. He devised that plan there. But his visa was running out, and so briefly Wilder had to move to Mexico and then re-entered the United States, and after 5 years became a United States citizen. His first break came in 1934 when Paramount hired him as a staff writer. His writing quota then was 11 pages a week. The head of the writing department introduced Wilder to Charles Brackett, and they became a writing team and wrote 16 pictures over a period of about 14 years. Among them were Bluebeard's Eighth Wife and Ninotchka, which they wrote for Ernst Lubitsch, a bunch of Mitchell Leeson films called Midnight, Rise My Love, Hold Back the Dawn. He wrote Ball of Fire for Howard Hawks, and then they also wrote The Lost Weekend and Sunset Boulevard together, and there were a few others. Lubitsch was Wilder's idol, and when Wilder finally got to direct his first feature film, which was The Major and the Minor, he called Lubitsch and he said, "Tomorrow I'm going to be directing the first scene, the first day of my first movie, and I'm terrified." And Lubitsch said to him, "I've directed 70 movies, and I can tell you that every day I'm still terrified, so go and direct." When Wilder wanted to direct, the studio resisted it, but they liked the team of Wilder and Brackett so much that they felt they could keep Billy Wilder happy if they let him direct. They thought Wilder would direct a very arty, terrible little movie that wouldn't make any money, and that would be the end of his directing career. Instead, Wilder purposely made an extremely commercial film. The Major and the Minor was a big hit. So when he finished it, the studio was shocked, and they actually wanted him to direct more. This is one take. A wide shot. That's it. Just this big wide shot in this semi-empty office. No close-ups, no coverage here, because the close-ups and the coverage are coming when we get to the Chinese restaurant. Those close-ups have far more emotional importance than any close-up here. It's a little guy in a big office. That's what this is about. So we stay wide. Wilder always said if the audience knows there's a crew on the set, the story's dead. The Apartment did very well at the Academy Awards. It was a winner for Best Picture, Best Screenplay, Best Director. It was the first time that a filmmaker simultaneously won all three of those categories. It also won for Best Editing and Best Art Direction. Billy Wilder in his career won 7 Oscars. He was actually nominated for Best Director 8 times. He won twice, for The Apartment and for The Lost Weekend. He was nominated for Best Screenplay 12 times. And he won for The Lost Weekend, Sunset Boulevard, and The Apartment. He also won Best Picture once. That was obviously also The Apartment. And he won the Thalberg Award in 1987 for the body of his work. Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine were also nominated for Best Actor and Actress, but they lost to Burt Lancaster, who won for Elmer Gantry, and Liz Taylor, who won for Butterfield 8. Overall, The Apartment received 10 nominations for Best Picture, Best Screenplay, written directly for the screen, Best Director, Best Actor, Jack Lemmon, Best Actress, Shirley MacLaine. Jack Kruschen, who played Dr. Dreyfus, won for Best Supporting Actor. Best Editing also was nominated for Best Art Direction, Best Cinematography, and Best Sound.
Desk 861 on the 19th floor, and I'm on the 27th floor. Paneled office.
And the Lonely Guy music has come back to orchestrate Baxter's confession to her that he really was just using Sheldrake. At the beginning of the movie, that's what he was trying to do, use Sheldrake to move up the ladder. But now he really doesn't want to do that anymore. He's fallen in love with her.
No. You know how people talk, so I decided it would be better if we didn't see each other until after everything was settled. Divorce-wise.
Even the guy in the back who's sweeping up is mentioned in the script. So here we go in a perfectly timed walkout. She goes. Baxter slowly takes off for the woman by the magazine rack, and the guy comes out of the phone booth. Baxter doesn't even flinch. Goes off alone, picks up a book or a magazine. Now, if you hated Sheldrake, you really hate him now. The arrogance and the way he treats the shoeshine guy.
Yeah, much obliged.
Here's a breakdown of figures on personnel turnover. 37% of our female employees...
And now we're going to get the callback that was planted at the very beginning of the movie.
It's New Year's Eve. Relax.
Yes, sir.
Well, I suppose you'll be on the town tonight celebrating.
Naturally.
The executive washroom key is going to be substituted for the apartment key.
The only thing is, Baxter, I'm staying at the athletic club, and it's strictly stag, so if you don't mind.
Don't mind what?
You know the other key to your apartment.
One of Billy Wilder's close associates on many of his films was a man named Doane Harrison. He was probably one of those brilliant behind-the-scenes craftsmen that just supported a great director. Doane Harrison probably met Wilder in 1939 when they were both working on a Mitchell Leeson film called Midnight. Wilder wrote that with Charles Brackett, and Harrison cut several Leeson films in that period. They clearly became friends and began working together, not only on those films, but when Wilder directed his first film, The Major and the Minor, in 1942, Doane Harrison was the editor. After that, Billy Wilder kept Harrison on as an editor and then as a production associate and eventually as an associate producer on movies like The 7-Year Itch, Love in the Afternoon, Some Like It Hot, and The Apartment. Their last movie together was The Fortune Cookie. Harrison died in 1968. It was probably Doane Harrison that helped Billy Wilder with his visual style of only using the edit when it's absolutely necessary. Wilder also spent a lot of time observing Howard Hawks on Ball of Fire, which Wilder had written, and took a lot from Hawks' visual style and kept it for his own, although you can also see the influence of Ernst Lubitsch in so much of his work.
Say, Baxter, you gave me the wrong key.
No, I didn't.
But this is the key to the executive washroom.
That's right, Mr. Sheldrake. I won't be needing it because I'm all washed up around here.
What's gotten into you, Baxter?
Just following doctor's orders. I've decided to become a mensch. You know what that means? A human being.
Now, hold on, Baxter.
Save it.
And there's the moral of the story, the human being, the mensch. He's now going to become a mensch. Wilder said, "It's not necessary for a director to know how to write, but I do expect a director to know how to read." And he found with many of the directors he worked with when he was only writing, they didn't read what was in the script. Mitchell Leeson, in particular, is probably a director who's most responsible for getting Wilder to direct. Leeson would ignore the screen directions, the stage directions, and change the dialogue. Leeson had actually been a dress designer, and he had become an art director for Cecil B. DeMille, and DeMille had made him a director. Brackett and Wilder wrote Hold Back the Dawn for Mitchell Leeson. One day they were at lunch and they met Charles Boyer, who was in the movie. And they said to Charles Boyer, "How's the scene in the hotel room going?" Boyer said, I cut that from the movie. I decided I didn't want to do the scene, and Mitchell Leeson, the director, agreed with me that we didn't have to do the scene because in the scene I have to talk to a cockroach who's climbing up the wall, and I would never talk to a cockroach. So we cut the scene. Wilder and Brackett were so upset that they went back to their offices. They were still writing the third act of that movie. And they decided to take all of Charles Boyer's dialogue and reduce it as much as possible and give all the good dialogue to his co-star, Olivia de Havilland, in Revenge. Wilder eventually left Paramount because they wanted to change the German version of Stalag 17. Paramount wanted to remove any references to German Nazis and change it to Polish soldiers so they wouldn't offend the German audiences when the movie played in Germany. Wilder was very upset, and so he finished the movie Sabrina that he was working on, and he left Paramount after being there for 18 years. And from here, we go to New Year's Eve, this very dramatic noir shot of Shirley MacLaine. She's been waiting, and here he comes. And she's alone. She thinks she's stuck with Sheldrake at this point. We have the two shot. They're in their usual booth with their usual shot. Very beautiful photography here, very beautifully lit.
Hotel room in town, not on New Year's Eve.
Ring out the...
She's still got the fish behind her. It's very low-key. And in his direction, we've got chaos.
Actually, it's all Baxter's.
Baxter?
Hey, he wouldn't give me the key to the apartment.
And she finds out that
No, he just walked out on me. Quit.
he won't give the key up.
Right in my face.
The nerve.
Yeah, little punk. After all I did for him. Said I couldn't bring anybody to the apartment. Especially not Miss Kubelik. What's he got against you anyway?
I don't know. I guess that's the way it crumbles. Cookie-wise.
So she calls back his line, the cookie-wise crumbling line.
I'd spell it out for you, only I can't spell.
That's a callback, too. He doesn't get it at all. He's an idiot. And so it's midnight. Light change. And she's thinking about what to do.
Happy New Year, friend.
And he, of course, has to turn around. And now we move into Kubelik for a close-up. She's thinking. And in a moment, Billy Wilder is going to do one of his 10 rules, which is let the ending build and build and build and then get out quick. The lights come back up. He turns around, and as it says in the script, he looks, she's gone, and in her chair is her hat.
Where are you, friend?
Runs a house and a half. We've seen this in Manhattan when Harry Met Sally. She comes in, same shot as the gas shot. She comes to the top of the stairs. She thinks of the gun, of course. And he's got the champagne, and we know where it came from, why it was there. He was going to toast for one at midnight.
How's your knee?
I'm fine all over.
Now we're going to come in, and we have the last shot in the movie. And contrary to the romantic notion that the last shot in the movie, starting right here, was the first take, and they only did one take, that's simply not true. This is take number 7. They only did 7 takes, and this is it. He's already got one glass out. He's unwrapped a second glass. All the pictures are bookcase. They're all down. We really have a view of the apartment we have never had before. They're going to sit together on a couch. We've never been here in the entire movie like this. And so we have the 2 shot of the guy and the girl together. We push in.
Cake every Christmas. Cut.
I love you, Miss Kubelik.
She's not so sure about love. but we're going to get out quick.
Did you hear what I said, Miss Kubelik? I absolutely adore you.
And even here at the end, Billy Wilder builds the romantic notion. She takes off her coat, she's going to stay, and she gives him a great smile. And as we move into the title and the fade out, her smile and his smile gets broader and bigger and bigger. This is Bruce Bloch. I hope you've enjoyed this commentary on Billy Wilder's remarkable film, The Apartment.